Discovery in the woods in Jacksonville has some archaeologists scratching their heads. They say what they found is not common at all for its time period.
Discovery in the forest outside Jacksonville has left archaeologists stumped, for what they have unearthed is hardly normal for its era. Buried deep in Florida's swamplands, under thick coverings of peat and centuries of quiet, lay a haunting mystery saved for nearly 8,000 years. What had started as simply a normal building job soon became one of the most sensational archaeological finds in history. Human skulls, ancient fabrics, and the delicate remains of a lost civilization, all lay patiently in wait to be uncovered. The wish was evident, to learn more about the native past of the area, to rebuild the long and rich tale of its original people, and to cobble together the remnants of lives long gone. Yet what power of nature would have conserved a complete Stone Age cemetery in such incredible form? When scientists exposed an 8,000-year-old skull and peered inside, the discovery that lay before them rendered even the most seasoned researchers wordless. The device that first disrupted the dead had not been intended to be discovered. It was meant to be a routine workday in Central Florida. The construction company crew was merely grading the land for a new housing complex on the fringes of Titusville, a few miles from the fabled launch pads of Cape Canaveral. The air was warm, thick with the smell of pine and wetland, as a backhoe operator worked his machine along the borders of a soggy expanse known to locals as Windover Pond. As the machine's claw cut deep into the wet earth, yanking out clumps of peat and muddied water, something strange caught the operator's attention. At first, it seemed nothing more than a peculiarly shaped rock. But the marsh was soft and spongy. No such rock should have been hidden there. Something stirred his curiosity. He climbed down from the machine, his boots sinking into the wet ground, and stooped low. Gloved hands carefully brushed away the dark peat. What lay beneath his fingers sent his blood cold. A beautifully preserved human skull was nestled in the muck. Its vacant eye socket stared straight at him, as if expecting someone, after all these centuries of keeping silent, to finally reveal its resting ground. The discovery caused a domino effect. Police were summoned, the area cordoned off, and witnesses started making wild guesses. The initial assumption was a dark but reasonable one, maybe a contemporary crime victim, a cold case hidden in the marsh, had finally emerged. But when the medical examiner saw it, his face did not show shock but intense curiosity. Kneeling by the skull, he handled it gingerly. "The bone is much too dark, too waterlogged," he grumbled. "This wasn't recent. This has been here in the bog for an endlessly long period." His voice was a hush, silencing the onlookers, whose import seemed to resonate in the thick air. The reality was breathtaking. Forensic analysis had verified that this was no contemporary catastrophe, it was something from the past, far, far in the past. The police, aware of the scale, stood back and handed the case over to the archaeologists, who were specifically equipped to interpret the silent vocabulary of earth and bone. And with that one choice, history itself changed. What had started as a routine excavation had turned into a find that would rewrite the narrative of North America. Windover Pond, the marsh that had held its secret for 7,000 years, soon attracted the notice of Dr. Glenn Doran, a young but dedicated archaeologist from Florida State University with expertise in ancient human skeletons. He came ready for modest returns, some fragments, maybe a lone bone or two, the sort of leftovers typical of prehistoric sites. But the moment he set foot on the soggy ground, enveloped by heavy humidity and far-off frog calls, he knew this was something other than that. Bones were not plentiful here, there were too many of them. Skulls, ribs, vertebrae, and long bones were embedded in the peat like jewels set inside dark velvet. "This isn't a single burial," Doran explained later. "This was a whole community frozen in time." Samples were sent off for radiocarbon dating carefully, and the results were eagerly anticipated. For it was unusual, nearly unknown, in North America to find remains dated before 2,000 years. But Windover's abundance promised something far more profound. When the results came back, the reality caused academic shock waves. These bones were more than 7,000 years old. Stop for a moment to picture it, these individuals had lived thousands of years prior to the wonderful Egyptian pyramids ever being constructed, long prior to Stonehenge came into existence on the English plains, long prior to there even being writing anywhere on this planet. They were from the Stone Age, at the very beginning of human civilization, and they had existed here, in Florida. The significance of the Windover find cannot be exaggerated. It was among the most spectacular archaeological discoveries in North America, a glimpse into lives so far away they almost seemed mythical. And yet, still more secrets were waiting to be yielded by the swamp, secrets that would shake every conceivable idea of what could be. Windover was not a quiet ruin, it was an active swamp. Even before digging could start, the archaeologists had to overcome a Herculean task. This was not some arid, dusty expanse of earth, it was an ecosystem still full of life and water. The year before, kayakers in Minnesota had discovered a human skull in a river. But Windover was worse, wet and recalcitrant, it was not going to yield its secrets without a fight. To get to what was beneath, the archaeologists were going to have to drain it. It wasn't easy. For 2 years of backbreaking work, they toiled with precision engineering. Over 150 industrial well points were sunk into the swamp, linked by pumps and pipes working around the clock, sucking water out at a deafening 700 gallons per minute. Week after week, month after month, day after day, the constant pounding of the pumps was the beat of the project. And slowly, very slowly, the swamp started to pay off. Underneath its crust, there was a huge prehistoric graveyard, an ancient necropolis buried under peat and mire. There were bodies everywhere, arranged to rest in spooky uniformity. Each skeleton was tightly wound in the fetal position, arms around knees as if going back into the womb. Some of them lay face down, nearly as if praying or submitting. Wooden stakes held the wrappings down to the floor of the bog, keeping the bodies in position. And yet, remarkably, the bodies did not look ancient. The skeletons were surprisingly intact, like they had been buried only a few decades before. The peat's peculiar chemistry, low oxygen, low acidity, had formed a natural preservation chamber that protected the bodies from rot. Windover was, in effect, a time capsule. A flash-frozen snapshot of the Stone Age, preserved by time. But in this incredible cemetery, one skull would shatter all expectations and revolutionize scientific history. Initially, the finding of the bodies was overwhelming in itself. Then something more bizarre showed up. While lifting one skull, a technician stopped. "It feels heavy," he said, perplexed. That did not make sense. Old skulls are typically brittle and hollow and fragile, time devours them, making them light and porous. But this one had weight. It was dense and heavy, as if it contained something inside. Additional skulls were picked up, and once more, the same thing. Heavy. Dense. Unusual. Scientists began to wonder. They called in fiber optic cameras to take a look inside. Rather than empty space or rotting peat, the skulls showed something incredible. MRI scans verified the fact, within several of these skulls, the folds and grooves of preserved human brains still lingered. The find was unprecedented. A human brain had never been seen to last for almost 8,000 years before. Despite being shrunk to a small fraction of its former size, its anatomy was astoundingly preserved, the ridges of the cortex, the delicate membranes, even individual neurons were apparent under a microscope. It had never been observed before. Archaeology had recovered heaps of bones and tools, but never soft tissue from such an ancient time. Windover's bog had done what no tomb or sarcophagus could. Without human intervention, nature had created perfect preservation. "We're literally holding the biology of people who lived before the first cities," whispered one technician in awe. The magnitude of the discovery shook the scientific world. Not only had brains survived, but perhaps their genetic material had endured as well. If DNA were extracted from these samples, it would fill in the void between ancient times and today, providing a glimpse into a people who existed thousands of years ago before history was recorded. The DNA that shouldn't exist. The task of extracting DNA from such delicate ancient material was left to geneticist Dr. Bill Houseworth, an expert in ancient DNA. Traditional lore was that DNA, especially in hot and humid places such as Florida's wetlands, would not last more than a few centuries before totally disintegrating. The organic decomposing enzymes coupled with water and heat generally meant the end for any possibility of retrieving genetic material. The Windover site was different, however. The bog's special chemical makeup had, in effect, preserved the brains in a cryogenic manner. This natural refrigeration had chilled decomposition to a nearly unimaginable level, providing Houseworth and his team with an unusual opportunity to push the boundaries of what was thought to be possible. With meticulous attention, the lab technicians processed the tissue samples using sterile equipment and delicate enzymatic treatment. They set out to extract any fragments of DNA that may have survived the millennia. Each step was carefully controlled to prevent contamination from present-day DNA. One small slip could make the results worthless. Weeks went by while the team kept waiting in anticipation for the results. When the test results eventually came, the shock was instantaneous and tremendous. The team had extracted viable human DNA, not impurities from the modern era or from laboratory settings, but actual genetic material from the very men and women whose brains were excavated at Windover. More analysis cross-checked this ancient DNA against contemporary genetic profiles. What came back confirmed a larger narrative of human migration and heritage. These were Native Americans, direct heirs of Ice Age people who had crossed the Bering Land Bridge thousands of years earlier. The DNA samples were the oldest recoverable human genetic material ever found in the Western Hemisphere at the time. This discovery was not only a milestone in archaeology. It revolutionized the game of genetics and ancient DNA studies. It broke through long-held beliefs regarding preservation boundaries and created new windows to comprehend man's earliest travels across the continents. That which was previously deemed impossible had now been established beyond a shadow of doubt. Sacred ceremonies, sacred water. Why did the old people bury their dead in a swamp? At first glance, the reason may appear sensible. Wetlands are natural warehouses for preservation. But the truth was much richer, based on deep spiritual convictions. Windover was more than an easy campground. It was hallowed land, a site that was filled with significance and awe. Every body discovered there spoke of ritual and respect well beyond what anyone had envisioned for a North American Stone Age society. Archaeologists were shocked to learn that each body had been wrapped with painstaking care, not in rough animal skins, as had previously been widely assumed, but in real fabric. These were genuine textiles expertly interwoven with elaborate patterns and careful stitching, all perfectly preserved in the acidic peat bog. It challenged received wisdom. The notion of individuals living more than 8,000 years ago creating such sophisticated cloth